Okay, so as you can see, today I'm very pleased to be joined by Mark Robertson. Now, Mark, this is Psychobilly Zoom 8.
Right.
Really, you should have been at least one, two, or three, because I ask people how they sort of got interested or discovered psychobilly, but you and your mates invented it basically. So let's start from the very beginning, and you are the very beginning, or at least part of the very beginning.
Well, yeah, I think I'm number three actually in the official pecking order. Well, somebody claimed the number one, and then I gave Nigel the two, so I'm number three.
That's fine. I think that's pretty good. So, I mean, you've told your story in your books, The Devil's Rhythm, specifically about the Meteors early days, which is
Yes.
still available. I think we'll give that a plug later. But
Yeah.
this, obviously, so anybody that's read them, they're going to know a lot about this. But this is going to be an historical document, absolutely from the person that was there at the time. And when we're all dead and gone, they're going to look back and say, "He was a bad chap, that Mark Robertson." So,
I hope so. Yeah.
can we start right from the very beginning? Your first interest in music and music.
Yeah, I suppose beyond nursery rhymes and stuff like that. And I suppose I would there be some music on the TV um, that I might have listened to. But the first thing that really hit me and gave me an interest in music, which it was my choice, would have been the Beatles because I was born in 1955 and then 1961. You couldn't get away from the Beatles, so it was the Beatles. Uh, they were young, they were a group. Um, Beatlemania was everywhere. And I persuaded my mum to take me to the cinema, and we watched Hard Day's Night, a sort of documentary with the Beatles in, and that was I was really hooked. And my brother, who was a couple of years younger, was the same. And the first thing we liked about the Beatles, they had much longer hair than we did. My dad was a barber in the Navy and used to cut, used to have crew cuts all the time. So it was the long hair, it was the being chased by girls bit. And we used to have, for some reason, in the house, we had an old mandolin in a case. And my brother and I would like run up and down the street waiting to be chased by girls, as the Beatles were. Never happened. And then, the first records I would have bought with my own pocket money would have been Beatles singles. Um, and then uh, at the time, my parents really didn't like the Beatles. Um, but then once they began to like the Beatles, I had to find something that they didn't like, and that was the Stones. Because you can't as a kid, like music that your parents do. Um, that was my thought anyway. So it was the Stones, and then from then into heavy rock, hard rock, Black Sabbath. I think that was the first album I would have bought would be Black Sabbath. So we're talking here about 1970 or thereabouts. And for me, the interesting stuff was in the hard rock field, heavy rock field, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath. In the so My brother and I used to actually listen to Sabbath and then go up to the top of the garden and burn a Bible. So we're sort of into Satanism well before the Devil's Rhythm. Um, yeah, so that was it. Listening on to music on the radio, Radio Caroline, and the Radio One DJs, particularly John Peel. He was playing the sort of music that I wanted to to play eventually because I thought about playing, and the thing that sparked me into that was Woodstock. The movie came out. There was a young drummer called Mike Shreve who played for Santana, and he was 20 years old, and he played this drum solo in front of 500,000 people, and I thought that could be me. So that was decided then to take the drums up.
What did you went out and bought a drum kit?
Well, my dad bought me the drum kit, and I had to wash his car for 2 years to pay for it. There was a shop. I was living in Cardiff at the time, and there was a shop in Cardiff called Grimways, which anybody from Cardiff at a certain age would remember well. A sort of a real second-hand everything you could get there at Grimwade's, and I got an Olympic white Olympic drum kit from Grimwade's with a pair of Grimwade's drumsticks, which were completely different sizes. I think they just sort of laid down a couple of bits of wood, but that was my first kit. And I then looked at an album cover to see how to set up a drum kit. I didn't really know, and just started hitting it. Briefly, because my parents believed that we should both be treated equally, my brother got a guitar, and he got it was a Vox pear drop, and it had all these great effects buttons on it, fuzz and everything like that. So I looked at that, and I thought, actually, this is much more interesting than the drums. So I grabbed the guitar, but I was shit at that, and so I went back to the drums.
Now, you were being born in 1955. You were smack bang in the middle of punk as well. How did that affect you at all? I mean, well, it obviously
In
did, but when?
Yeah, so punk would have been. I moved to Manchester in 1973, and then punk hit Manchester about 76. So I was in there really at the beginning. I had this. I was had the radio on at home one evening, and Euros by the Damned came on, and I just fell off my seat. I just thought, this is the most brilliant thing I've ever heard in my life. This is how music should be. So I chucked all my heavy metal albums away, and got into punk. And in Manchester was a really vibrant scene. A lot of bands played there. I saw the Clash there, the Banshees. A lot of bands from London came out, but there's also a really good local scene. The Buzzcocks, Magazine, the Drones, V2, John Cooper Clarke, all that sort of thing that was, around the punk scene. So I was out watching gigs, 2 or 3 nights a week.
So when did the playing in a punk band? How did that come about?
Well, I carried on with that, moved down to London, carried on doing the same thing. I hadn't played, apart from school bands I was playing in when I was a kid, just guys from school. I hadn't played in a band since then. I moved down to London. I thought, yeah, I should get into a band, and I saw this advertisement for a band looking for a drummer, and they said they're called the Models, and I had a single in my collection called "Freeze Man of the Year" by the Models with Marco Pironi, who was later in the Outs. So I rang them up and joined them, and when I got down there, they weren't the same Models. And they were sort of new wave-ish. We rehearsed a bit, and didn't really go anywhere. So I thought that's not really for me. I'll wait. And I suppose the eureka moment was, for some reason, I went to see the Police in 1979, and the Cramps were supporting, and I'd never heard of them before then, and I just saw this band. I thought, my God, this is it. It's the same feeling as I got when I heard New Rose. Coolest band in the fucking world. Amazing. And I just sort of stared at them, and I just looked at Nick Knox and thought, God, I want to be this drummer. So I bought the Human Fly EP, just played that incessantly. And then I decided, yeah, I want to be in a band, but it's got to have the feeling I get from the Cramps.
Weirdly, they were both on the same label, Legal Records, weren't they? At the time, which is probably why they're on the same bill.
Yeah, I think Copeland was, in fact, Miles Copeland continued to manage them while we were actually touring with them, because he came to one of the shows.
So, I mean, at the same time as all that was going on, there was quite a big underground rockabilly sort of scene. Were you ever sort of involved or touched by that at all?
I wasn't really. I was a punk through and through, and it was only where I was working. There was a girl called Jo Sabini who was into that rockabilly stuff. She used to talk about the places she used to go to. That I didn't go to any places at the time, but then, as chance would have it,
you'd have got your head kicked in back in those days, wouldn't you? If you turned up
May
as
have done. Yeah, I was very much aware that punks and Teds were fighting on the King's Road. So I did, I didn't go down on a Saturday. I didn't really fancy fighting Teds. I mean, there were things going on, skins v punks. I mean, I went to an Adam the Ants show, and after that, the punks were ambushed by skins. I went to a Dexy show, and it was a mod band headlining, and then after we came out, the skins jumped the mods in Camden Town Tube Station. But my dad had just given me a skinhead cut, and I had a Harrington, so I sort of sailed through that. So Joe was the first person I was sort of aware that actually young people would go and listen to rockabilly, because I'd seen some, rock and roll on the telly, but I mean, in the time I was born, that was sort of, I suppose, the artists were getting older. It wasn't. I didn't look at it as being a young person's music. I didn't aspire to be in Bill Haley's band. I wanted to be in the Cramps.
yeah. So when I mean, so you didn't obviously you didn't bump into Nigel and Paul in the royalty or something like that. So how did you
No, not
come
at
across
all.
those two fellas?
Well, Joe Sabini was actually going out with Nigel's brother, Russell. And she said, my boyfriend's brother's in a band and they need a drummer. So do you fancy giving it a go? And she said they're sort of rockabilly, but a bit wilder. So I went round to Paul's house in Clapham and in the famous cellar, and had a tryout with them. I didn't have the drum kit there. There was a suitcase, so we just played through a few uh, rockabilly songs. I kept the beat, and I didn't really know what I was doing, but it all seemed to go well, and we got really well. And then we met socially, went to see the Cramps. And yeah, so I thought I better do a crash course in rockabilly if I'm going to be in a rockabilly influenced band. So it was actually it wasn't modern rockabilly, it was Kings of Rockabilly on Ace Records, volumes 1 and 2, and the Johnny Burnett trio. So I bought those so I could, you know, I know I knew that what the Cramps did wasn't pure rockabilly. Um, and what I wanted to do was bring the two together, if you like. And I did start going to Shades Rockabilly Club at the Manor House pub. And that's when I really first heard authentic rockabilly blasted through a big sound system. And I thought, God, this is bloody good. It had I could see that it had all the slap bass, and it had the primitive sound. And the first time I heard Deep Dark Jungle, I thought, like, this is it. So I continued my education, and we started rehearsing with Meteors.
How were those sort of rehearsals when you first did you sort of sit down and throw ideas, or did you just get up there and crack on with it and see what developed?
Well, at the time, if you were a band, a rockabilly band, you just basically put on to give the DJ a break. So you'd have a rockabilly night. The DJ was the main attraction, and a band would come on and do two 45-minute sets, so that people could go to the bar and the DJ could have a smoke outside or something like that. So we just literally started learning an hour and a half of covers. And at the same time, Paul had a couple of songs and Nigel had a couple of songs. And they would sort of introduce those. So we'd do maybe in the hour, maybe we'd have 20 minutes of our own songs, which I think was quite a revolution at the time. And then we did TV set by the Cramps, which was, I think, unheard of for any of the rockabilly bands that were playing. So it was a 2 45-minute set thing, and we did this at the first gig at the Sparrowhawk in that first summer. It didn't really go down very well, but we got through it. And then we did another one, which is the famous Cavern in Wilsden, where we were escorted off the stage and weren't allowed to finish our set because we'd obviously
Is that because of your hair?
Well, it was the hair, it was everything else. It was, yeah, the hair, the green hair didn't help. But I think what we were playing as well. I mean, they decided they hated us before we'd even played a note.
Yeah, you must
And
have
it's,
been trying to be antagonistic, I imagine, going
I
there with a
don't think
green
we
hair.
were. We were just trying to play our set. I mean, we had effectively the same set as we were playing at the Sparrowhawk. So there
Yeah.
was nothing revolutionary. Yeah, the TV set might have annoyed a few people, but by that time we'd attracted, about three or four fans, including Prof. The three or four people that liked the first show followed us to that one. Yeah, and once we were physically escorted out the building with baseball bats, we decided, Nick Garrard, the manager, decided we probably needed to find somewhere else to play other than the rocking circuit.
So was that like the point where you decided that this actually, we're going to take this seriously, we could go places?
Yeah, I think so. I think we just wanted to play, and we clearly couldn't play uh, on the rocking circuit. So Nick was then the next. We got a set of support spots with Levi Dexter, and these were all in what I would call normal places like the Dingwalls, and there we were playing a 35-minute set, a 40-minute set, so we could then drop a bunch of covers, and the proportion of our own songs grew, and we were getting some interest then, shall we say. You notice it firstly, everyone ignores you, and then a few people come up to look at you, and then the next time there are a few more people looking at you, and then the front of the crowd, the stage is crowded, and then people begin to react a bit, and that happened quite quickly.
Now, I was around at the very beginning of all this, but not around, but as a purchaser of records down in deep dark Devon. And I used to buy the NME and sounds and stuff, and I started seeing little just mentions of this band, the Meteors.
Yeah,
Um, and the first actual time I heard them was on the Alligator compilation, Homegrown Rockabilly,
yeah.
which I thought then that was definitely different. But then I was surprised to read on the notes that the band already weren't happy with that because they were wilder. So, I mean, what was the time scale for you recording that stuff? And tell us a bit about the first recordings, because if you listen back to it, even though you're self-critical, it is different. It doesn't sound like anything else on that album.
Yeah, I mean, we were really excited to be recording at such an early stage, and it was Terry Earle, who was the sort of former. He played drums in bands with Nigel and Paul, and he was really talent scouting on behalf of Alligator Records, which was Colin Silcox, and they wanted three tracks. I think they were short of tracks for this homegrown rockabilly. So Terry insisted that Nigel couldn't sing any of the songs. That was the first rule. And so we went into the studios. And we had two songs to do, and they said they wanted a third. So My Baby Loves Me was written in the studio, and it was BTW, which is a studio in Wood Green, which was just about three bus stops from where I used to live. On a Saturday, a guy called John Borthwick was the engineer, and we got in there, and he sort of said, "Right, just let you know, lads, I've got a referee football match in 4 hours, so just get it over and done with." So we did it pretty quickly. Got it down. I got a cassette to take back with me, and I was quite excited. First recording sort of thing, and I put it on, and I thought, yeah, I mean, we could hear that it was okay, um, but if I was thinking the thing that inspired me to get into this music was the Cramps, it was like a long way away, a long way away.
Was
And
it live you
so,
recorded that? Sorry.
no, I think no, it was. I think the studio was a four-track, maybe an eight-track. There were a few overdubs on it. I think the essence of it was done live. There was no click track. Um, it's such a long time ago that I can't remember all the details, but I think the fact that we got it down, mixed, and got cassettes run off within 3.5 hours, we must have done it pretty quickly.
So your evolution then into what became the Meteors was quite rapid by the sound of it.
Yeah, I mean, at that time we weren't called the Meteors. I think we were still Raw Deal. Um, and At the time of doing the recording, and then we looked for a band name, and then we tried. We thought the Hex was the first one, and it just sounded a bit heavy metal. So we were the Meteors, with the E's reversed. After the record label, basically. And yeah, so we'd been playing um, places like Dingwalls, and we started getting our own headlines at Hope and Anchor, which were really our shows. So we could do what we wanted, and people would then come to see us. And that was the first real evolution. I mean, if you see some of those Hope and Anchor shows, 3 or 4 shows in, you've got the full flow wrecking. So it went very quickly. I mean, London was a great place to be. It was a real pressure cooker. You developed very quickly. We were in the music press very quickly. We people Our crowd grew very quickly, and there were a lot of. I was going to lots of gigs as well, and you go to the Hope when we weren't playing, you see other bands. So we developed very, very quickly.
I mean, the second out record that I bought, the Meteors, was the Radioactive Kid Graveyard Stomp. Now I remember putting the Graveyard Stomp side on, so,
Yeah,
and then I flipped it over to Radioactive Kid, and this is the first time I heard Nigel. And
yeah,
that was that was that would have, I assume, it was your crampy sound sort of morphing into that, because that was totally different. A bit like when I
yeah,
bought Drug Train, when that was the single of the week, and I was listening to Matchbox at that point, and that was scared me to death as well. Flipping over, there was a bit of Charlie Feathers on there, but
yeah,
but the thing that struck me the most was the picture on the back cover. That poor bloke looked like he was getting his head kicked in in
yeah,
amongst a load of rockabillys. Now, was that representative of what was going on at your gigs? I mean, and
yeah. I
how did
mean,
it turn into that from bopping all night?
well, I mean, it happened gradually. You can see there's some photographs of the early Hope and Anchor shows, probably 2 or 3 shows in where that's beginning to start, that wrecking and pushing. In the photograph on the back of that single was taken in Gaz's Rocking Blues, which was a Billy's tiny little club packed to the gills. So basically, if you fell over, I mean, what's happened is the guy down there, some people are actually trying to help him up, but it doesn't look like it. But it's just if you start a push in a very crowded place, someone's going to go on the floor, and that's what happened. And it was a great photograph. Obviously, before that record, we'd had the Meteor Madness,
Yeah, you got to remember, I
which
was living in the Shire, so we
you
just
were
got
living in the
stuff as
Shire.
it we got stuff
Yeah,
as it sort of turned up. But anyway, yeah, tell us about that.
yeah. So we'd done the started on the rock and roll circuit, and we'd done the at the time every major was trying to sign a rockabilly band. The Stray Cats had got huge, um, and every major was after a rockabilly band. So we demoed for EMI, which then was released as the Lost album. Again, you can hear that you've got the very rockabilly live tracks, and you've got 7 of our own compositions, including The Room, which is really getting towards that crampish sort of thing. In fact, it was The Room that was played to the demo of The Room was played to the Cramps, which persuaded them to let us on the Cramps tour. But that's a later story. So the EMI offer we got was shite, and so we didn't take it. And Nick, our manager, was trying to think of ways we could ramp our game up without just getting in a van and tour around the country. And that's where the film Meteor Madness came in, product of a drunken session between Nick and the filmmakers. So we had a short film filmed over Christmas 80 into January 81. And the songs on the film are actually played live on the film. We didn't have any recordings. Um, and then we were at the Hope and Anchor in the dressing room, and Ace Records came along and said, "Well, we never got this film out. We'd like to put the soundtrack out." And so that then became Meteor Madness, the 4 track. Uh, so moving on from the recording in 4 hours, because the guys got to referee a football match, we were introduced to this classical sound recordist called Adam's Keeping, who was going to record us in the loft of an abandoned building in the East End. And he was going to record it all through 2 cross stereo mics in the middle of the band, which is how a lot of the early rockabilly rock and roll songs were done. And the way that that was done is you basically had to play everything live, and all the instruments, the amps were on carpet. So if the drums were too loud, you slid the carpet back 6 inches, etc. So we just put that down. It was all a bit weird, but we had confidence. I knew a bit about Ace Records, that they'd put out something decent. And so we banged out 45 versions of Voodoo Rhythm before Adam was happy with the mix. And so we got those 4 done, and recorded all done live, overdubbed the vocals at his house. And that became the first official Meteors release on our own terms. And that got some really, really good reviews. So that really did ramp it up. And then the film came out supporting Dance Craze. So yeah, we were getting about.
Are those? I can see it now. A Bear Family box set, the unreleased Meteors with 45 versions of Voodoo Rhythm on there. Is that they sort of sitting around
Not,
somewhere?
I think it's not possible. It was all done on a budget, and I think they just reused the tape each time.
Oh,
So
they even
you
did
just
that to
started
Elvis,
again.
didn't they? So,
You can't. I mean, you can't be lashing out for 2 reels of tape, can you? You know.
so those, so that obviously got you out, even got down to Devon, but I think it was retrospective after. Anyway,
Yeah.
so you suddenly did you notice the venues getting bigger and the audiences getting bigger? And I mean, I read somewhere that you said a lot of your early fans were Adam and the Ants fans.
Yeah,
Not
there
really.
was a particular moment. I mean, when um, Prince Charming came out, I think it was, or and the Ants. I'd followed the Ants from about '78, and they were really really cool at that time. And a lot of punks followed them. They became the go-to really after punk rock. You know, got a bit tired, and then the Ants went commercial, and they had this. Huge, hundreds of Ants fans looking for something else, based in London, and some of them came to the Meteors, and the sort of wrecking, the full on wrecking, was something I'd seen at Ants gigs, and suddenly it was at Meteor shows. And once you're pulling in that sort of people, we could sell the marquee out in half an hour. You know, we were doing bigger gigs, certainly.
Okay, so I got the chronological order wrong, but then tell us about the recording of because Radioactive Kid. I don't think there's ever been. It's a little bit like Runaway Boys with the Stray Cats. There's never been a similar song in sound to that, and I think we can say the same about Radioactive Kid. Or would you agree
Yeah,
with that, or would you? I don't know. It's just
yeah, I
my
think so.
opinion.
It's got. I mean, it's got a unique sound to it, and it was. So we had the same sound recordist, Adam's Keeping, but now since we sold some records, we have a slightly bigger budget, and we did it at the Regal Cinema in Hitchin, which was being gutted at the time. So there was the building was completely empty, just a huge big empty cinema, no seats or anything. And we set up in the middle of that, and next door there was a recording studio, a 16 track. So they ran the mics from the recording studio into the cinema. Adam was very much to do with ambient sound. You know, what does the instrument actually sound like? And so we had a bit more control over what we did because we had 16 tracks, but still, essentially, it was live. Um, and so that track was really captured the the Meteors live, and then we, because it was a building site and because it was a cinema, we were looking for something to make the explosion at the end. So essentially, that was Nigel dropping a scaffolding plank in the middle of the cinema, and all the walls were mic'd up with these um, ribbon mic things and ambient mics. So uh, that entire explosion is just a scaffolding plank being dropped. But when we heard that, um, and it was 1 minute 45 seconds of, and for me that was the best. That was the best recording that we did um, to date, really. I mean,
How
I like Graveyard Stomp, but for me that was essential. Meteors, and I think one of the reviews I read said Psychobilly starts here.
right? So how get the timescales again? So how long before the In Heaven recordings was that recorded?
Well, that single came out while we were on the Cramps tour, which was started in May of '81. And while we were on the Cramps tour, unbeknownst to us, Ireland, the A&I guy from Ireland, Andrew Lauder, was trying to sign us. He was ringing our manager, but Nick didn't have an answer machine. So we came back from the Cramps tour, and I'd had to pack my job in to go on the Cramps tour. So we came back and we got the news that Ireland were looking to sign us. And so it would be in the summer of '81 that we finally did the deal. Finished the Cramps tour. We'd done the big London show with the Cramps, Screaming Lord Such. And then we were negotiating. And towards the end of the summer, we started recording In Heaven.
Right, let's go back a minute. I want to hear about the Cramps. I bet Nick Knox was chuffed when you told him that he was your influence, wasn't
I wouldn't have even dared to go up to the guy and tell him that. The Cramps very much kept themselves on tour, apart from Kid Congo. Kid had replaced Brian Gregory. He was much younger than the other ones, and he was really a bit lonely on the tour. So we hung around a lot and drank an awful lot with him. And occasionally Nick would make an appearance, and generally would be to walk into someone's room where we're having a party and just jump up and down on the bed and leave. But I never like took him to one side and said, man, I'm really influenced by you. To me, that wasn't a particularly cool thing to do. But I mean, I could watch them every night. Um, that was why it was a no-brainer me packing my job in. I mean, you got to pack your job in. You're going to go on the road with your favorite band and watch them play every night. Didn't take long to make that decision.
he? Were
So
they
yeah, I
just a
mean,
bit aloof then? Is that, I mean, would you describe them as
well,
aloof or just
uh,
different?
Lux and Ivy were in their own world. I mean, they were just lived in their own world, and continued to do so. They were not. They didn't hang around and chat to people. They didn't, you know, necessarily want to meet all the fans. They just lived their own special life, and that I think made them who they were and gave them that creative edge. Nick was pretty quiet. Kid was the sociable one. I think they went on the tour and they was you know the moment they came on stage, they did their stuff. Once they're off stage, they're back to the hotel and not particularly interested in partying and whatever, apart from Kid.
Right. So okay. So we're talking about the Meteor. So we're back there. You've been signed to Ireland,
Yeah,
which is a reggae label basically.
yeah.
Um, and you've gone. So where have you recorded in heaven?
Right. So there was a studio called Ampro, which at the time was owned by Nick Lowe in Shepherd's Bush. And there was the engineer was a guy called Rob Keylock who played in a band. I think they'd been on Ace Records. So there was an Ace connection there. I think Andrew knew the guy as well. So we were put into there, and it was a 16-track studio. We'd been given the advance from Ireland, and we've been given like a grand each to buy new equipment. So I had a new drum kit, We had new gear, and we went in the studio to make the album. And we sort of decided pretty quickly that we wouldn't re-record anything that we'd done. We'd had obviously 3 tracks out on Homegrown Rockabilly, 4 on the Meteor Madness, and the 2 on the single. But we just go in and do stuff that people hadn't heard before, which left us with a bit of a problem because we were a couple of tracks short. And so Death Dance and Into the Darkness were actually written in the studio. I don't think we played Get Out My Cloud live before, but that Nigel wanted to do that, so we did that. So we got the tracks of In Heaven Down in a standard sort of studio way, which is put the drums down first with the guide guitar, and then everything else goes on. Overdubs, and because we've got 16 tracks, we've got a bit more to play with. And so we got it down quite quickly. We were very disciplined. I think we got it down in 4 or 5 days, maybe a bit longer, 6 days. And then we started mixing it, and we got the mix out, and it just wasn't. The sound wasn't anything to compare. If your benchmark is Radioactive Kid, it just sounded. The sound was just a bit flat, and we were a bit despondent about that. So we talked about it and the guys from Ace came down, listened to it again, and agreed with us. And so, what can we do about this? So we'll actually go and remix it. And we had one attempt, I think, at Snake's Ranch Studio in Chelsea. Didn't do anything, and we eventually ended up at Riverside Studios, which I think Cliff Richard had an interest in at the time as well, with another guy, engineer called Neil Richmond, and we remixed the whole thing from the start.
Okay, so then you were happy with it?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we did. There was we wanted it to sound bigger, and we nicked a few of the tricks that were around at the time. Really, the digital reverb thing. I mean, you can hear it in the Stray Cat. I mean, that snare sound in Runaway Boys. You want the snares to sound like that. You want everything to sound big, and we couldn't. We could in the studio, which is quite a small studio. We didn't have the live ambience, but what we did have was the digital reverb, which we used then to ramp it up, so everything sounded big, and it does sound big. And in fact, it's still even it's 40 odd years later. It's a really loud album.
Yeah, but so did John Peel come after this, or did you already get a
Came
sniff on John?
before that. Yeah, we got the name has been Get Around, and we got so this was pre-Island Deal, pre-Cramps tour, in fact, and we got a call that we could record a session for John Peel, and because when I was a heavy rocker growing up, John Peel was my go-to program for good music. I thought, this is bloody brilliant, gonna actually get to record a session for Peel. So we went in there and did, I think, 5 songs, 5 or 6. Paul had a habit when we were live of kicking my cymbals over. So as part of the show, so every cymbal I had was cracked. And you can listen to the John Peel session because those entrepreneurial Russians at Nuclear Music have released it on vinyl, along with everything else that we've ever recorded. So it's got the world's shittiest cymbal sound on it, but the recording's really good. And so that was went out on Peel, got a lot of complaints, or a number of complaints, about the lyrics of Love You to Death. And so when it was repeated on Peel, they didn't play that track again, but I think it was repeated 4 times from public demand.
Was it somewhat recorded Maida Vale or something like that?
Maida Vale, yeah.
That's top class studio then.
Top class studios for a band with shit gear. But yeah, I mean, it was good. I mean, I think we did Voodoo Rhythm, Rockabilly Psychosis, um, Rock House, Love You to Death, and one other one which I can't remember. But yeah, I mean, the playing's great, and the Peel really loved it, and it was for me a real moment of pride hearing it broadcast. Um, and people have taped it since, and he's talking about the tracks. He says this is the first record on the John Peel show of Rockabilly Psychosis that has the word ectoplasm in it. So that was particularly good.
So you're flying now, aren't you? You've got an album out that's been but was it critically acclaimed at the time?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it. You say it. Obviously, Island was a reggae label. Chris Blackwell ran Island, and Andrew Lauder signed a number of bands while Chris was on holiday. And when Chris came back, he decided he didn't like any of the bands that Andrew had signed. So Andrew parted company with the label before the album came out. And they were sort of having invested the money, Island was obliged to put the album out. But they just released the first U2 record, I think. They had Kid Drill and the Coconuts, Grace Jones, Bob Marley, etc. They weren't particularly interested in us. But the album got out, got some good reviews, got international release, and it was released on Polygram in France, etc. And another major that had an island link up in Germany. So it was out, and it was good. And but we were sort of moving on really by then. Where can we go next?
Oh, one
The
thing we haven't mentioned, and Mark, sorry to interrupt there. We before we get past it, is the Clapham South Escalators. Where did that come
Oh yeah, so we in the Neil Richmond remix session at Riverside, we got everything done quickly, and we had about half a day left, and we actually brought all of our equipment down to the studio um, on the off chance that we'd have to re-record something for In Heaven, but we didn't in the end. And so Neil said, "Well, you've got um, half a day here. Do you want to use it?" So we said, "Oh yeah, yeah, we'll do something." And Nick had come down at that point and said, "Yeah, why not record something a bit different?" So we're doing "Get Me to the World on Time" in the Meteors set, um, and we had never done cardboard cutout or even attempted it. And "Leave Me Alone," Paul wrote in the studio as we were playing it. So we just literally banged that thing out. Um, and then we were obviously contractually stuck with Ireland, even though they didn't want us and they didn't want anything else coming out of the Meteors. So that's how that became the Clapham South Escalators. And, under a very effective disguises on the photo on the front.
from? It was one of the firsts about In Heaven was I remember when I excitedly, I think I had to save up for it for a couple of weeks. Well, when I pulled it out, it had the black inner sleeve, and I thought that's the
Yeah,
first time I've ever seen that.
yeah. I mean, it was great, and it was supposedly on our own Lost Soul Records. So obviously it was Ireland. So yeah, we felt a part of that, but we hung around a bit at Ireland like artists do. They had chart rooms and all that, but nobody really wanted us there at all. They had this the room with the jukebox in where we would always sit and wait until somebody deemed to talk to us. But they had a big box of demo cassettes that people would send in. And so I had a Walkman at the time, so I would like listen to the demo cassettes. And I found a demo cassette by the Nips, which was really good, so I stole that.
The
I think
punks in
these
it eventually.
they were in the this was in the rejects box. These demo cassettes. There's also a guy called Teutonic Veneer, and he sent 7 albums worth of um, cassettes to Ireland, but they're all in the reject box as well. I don't know if anything came out of his thing. So Mr. Teutonic Veneer, but maybe we became the Sisters of Mercy or something. I don't know.
So you've got this album out. It's done pretty good. You got
Yeah,
it's made you internationally known. So how
yeah.
did what happened next? The big explosion. You're all sort of looking at being millionaires and
Yeah, I don't think we don't we just had enough money. I mean, at the time up to that time, and still through all that Meteors period, Paul lived at home with his dad, and Nigel lived at home with his parents, and I had to pay rent. So I was the only one that had a risk of being homeless if things didn't work. So I was quite happy to get the advance, obviously, and we were then doing some good gigs. So for me, it was carry on carrying on, basically. We got better gigs. We sold out the marquee even quicker than we did before. And we got John Curd, who was a major London promoter at the time, had started booking the Meteors on at the bottom of the bill on some of his shows. So we were starting to play the Lyceum. We played with, first one was with 999, then we were on with Killing Joke. And then we got, yeah, we support the Clash did 7 nights at the Lyceum, and we got on, and they had one support band a night, and we got on one of those, and that was the first time, other than the Cramps gig, that we got an encore on a big stage. So we were getting, the band was definitely ramping up in our how we projected to a big audience, how professional we were, and yeah, we were really looking for. We were playing much better, and round us, the organisation was better. That we had new gear, things didn't keep on breaking down, the cymbals weren't kicked to shit, you know.
did Strummer and the boys show any interest in you? Because they were renowned rockabilly fans, weren't they?
Yeah, I don't really recall any. We weren't like, there's certainly nobody had a camera backstage. They may have watched us. They may have not watched us. But for us, for me, I mean, the Clash was, the early Clash was part of my punk, you know, life, and to be supporting them and to be set up in front of Topper's riser was just amazing. And also to go down as well as we did, that was great.
But when did the cracks start to appear?
Well, I suppose round about after the album came out, we had more money. Um, we had more free time, I suppose. We had still had gigs in, but we were beginning to travel a bit out of London, and we had people that followed us faithfully, and we'd had some crowd trouble in London, the Rock Garden and the 100 Club, but that was from skinheads, sort of far right um, skinheads. And when we moved out of London, some of the people that followed Meteors out of London would maybe rub the locals up the wrong way, but like you would if you're a football fan following your team. So the security started becoming a necessity, and we had a three-piece band with three-piece security, which was bizarre for me. And then um, Paul was spent. A lot of people, diehard Meteors fans, would go around to Paul's house. He had his own circle of people that followed him around everywhere, and never, gainsaid him. And so we had a discussion about, what we were doing and stuff like that. Sometimes I just said no, and Paul wasn't used to hearing that. So we started having a few rows backstage. I mean, we'd had a row backstage in Cramps store, but it was something and nothing. Um, but it's this, they started getting a bit more serious. And we was, didn't affect any of the performances, but to my mind, I was wondering how much longer can I continue doing this? Because it was, playing was fine, but sometimes backstage it wasn't. Um, and as you know, luck would have it, we got a few gigs supporting Theatre of Hate, who I'd really liked. And Stan, the bass player, came up to me and said, Luke, the drummer's fallen out with Kirk. We're looking for a drummer. Would you like to audition? So I thought, there's no harm in taking the opportunity, try something different. So essentially, I was auditioning for them and rehearsing with them while I was still playing with the Meteors. I had one drum kit in the Theatre of Hate rehearsal studio, one drum kit with the Meteors. And at that point, they'd asked me if I wanted to join the band full time. And we had one more. We had a first Meteor show out of the UK, which was in Paris, what I was determined to do. So I thought, well, I'll do that. And then I'll come back and I'll leave or think about leaving. And that gig was great, it was recorded, went out live on French radio. I came back and Kurt Brandon said, well, I think we don't need two bands. I'd like you to phone Nick, the manager of the Meteors, and leave the band, but I want to listen in on the call, which would sound a bit strange to me. But so, yeah, that's as and when I left the Meteors at Christmas of 81.
And in hindsight, have you ever had any regrets about that?
Well, I certainly regret, I suppose, of joining Theatre of Hate because I did one gig with them and then I was out.
Why were you out? What happened there?
Well, it was it was it was quite a weird setup, I have to say. It's the weirdest band I've ever been in terms of the only band I've ever been in that rehearses at 9 a.m. in the morning, and the last person who arrives has to make tea for the rehearsal session. Essentially, after each gig, they record the gigs, the live gigs, on a cassette, and then Kirk and Terry Reyes, the manager, would listen to that. The band would wait in the dressing room, and then would come into the dressing room and go to the individual band members and point out their mistakes.
Oh, blimey.
So I can remember being in there. Billy Duffy was being told off. I wasn't told off, which was maybe a sign that I was about to get the boot. But I think they really wanted. They hadn't had a drummer for a while. They got this gig in Norwich just before Christmas. I think they wanted some Christmas money, so I was basically depping as a drummer, but nobody told me. But they did have the sort of motto I learned afterwards was Theatre House was we hire them to fire them, and it was Kirk and Terry's way of keeping people on their toes. And then they sacked Billy Duffy, and obviously his career went from much better afterwards. And they sacked about everybody in the band. And I was told by the drummer of a band called The Wall, a punk band, that then Kirk was in the pack, that he was sacked, and that they'd actually recorded his sacking on a cassette player, and that after he was sacked, they used to play the cassette of his sacking before the band went on. So maybe, which I think is a terrible thing to do, and I don't know if that's true or not, but maybe that's where he got one of his issues from. But I mean, I was pleased to play with them. It would have been nice to have been on Top of the Pops in Westworld. I enjoyed playing with them, and it did wonders for my drumming. I think the official reason was I didn't hit the drums hard enough. So I made sure that afterwards I learned to hit the drums even harder.
No, so I mean, your Meteors story ends pretty
Yeah,
much probably about a year or so before most of the other people that I'm talking to in these Psychobilly Zooms even starts.
yeah,
We so the idea with these interviews is to get the early days. So we've got your early days, but we do have to mention that you have gone on to have a long and extensive musical career. Plus,
Yeah,
you've written about these stories that you've told, plus a whole lot more. Have you got
yeah,
the books there?
I have got the books. So
When I
the
prepared earlier.
first, yeah, the first book telling the Meteor story is called The Devil's Rhythm. This is in its second and final reprint, so it is available. Um, for both this book and the next book I'm going to show you, there is a dedicated Facebook page called The Devil's Rhythm and Ride This Torpedo. You can go on that, and that's got all the order details. So this Devil's Rhythm is about the birth of the Meteors, and the Ride This Torpedo is the follow-up, and this takes story through the Escalators, the Deadbeats, my brief period in Chelsea, the Tall Boys, the Johnson family, the Queen Bees, Jerome Hammers and the Dorchmen, really up to date. Both books are available. There are some, if you go to the Facebook page with the book titles in the name, you can find out the order details.
Okay, and it's not a sales pitch. These are definitely finite in number, aren't they? So
They
you
are
don't hang
finite
around
in
if you want
number.
one.
Yeah, and there are a few. There are quite some stockists now. Crazy Love, Copacetic, Trash Wax, and the Psychobilly Shop that have signed copies of both books. But they are finite, definitely finite.
Yeah, we're watching this in 2025. So if you're watching this way into the future, you may have to go on to A books or something like that for.
Yeah,
Anyway, Mark, it's absolutely tremendous to speak to you and to get these stories directly from you, the man that was there. Um,
always a pleasure, Simon.
yeah, it's brilliant. Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it. And like I say, go to Mark's Facebook pages, the book's Facebook pages, if you want to buy those books. And I expect everybody will now be digging out their copy of In Heaven and the other records we talked about with the extra knowledge that we've got, and listen to them again.
Hope so.
Brilliant, brilliant. Anyway, Mark, thanks very much for your time. We've got an hour's worth there, so tremendous. Thank you very much indeed.
Good. Cheers, Simon. Thanks.